This is Idiots versus Idiots. We are a business and marketplace news podcast brought to you by the two brown and white cherubic faces you see on your screen here.
Why does it have to be brown and white? Why do you have to bring color into the situation?
Okay, because we are brown and white. I mean, it's just a matter of fact.
Valid point. Go ahead.
I'm not making a racial statement. Jeez.
Well, I just wanted to clarify.
Okay. And we like to, on every show, we break down 4 stories from the wide world of business, entrepreneurship, and the marketplace. And so we do a show where I explain to the big man here what sometimes I have to explain to him what things are because he's a Gen Xer, spirit of a boomer. And I find it so endearing that there is literally no insult I can throw.
You just love to chew on me about that. He knows how much I hate to be called a boomer.
That's
so much so that one of our wonderful idiot listeners out there commented on agreeing with Danny, saying,
"Well, it's my former."
He basically is a boomer, but no,
it's my best friend and former roommate. So like he's doing it to be on my side.
Well, but you know what? Forget both of you. Both of you can jump off a bridge.
So,
all right, go ahead.
Well, you can't. We're trying to find new publisher advertising, and you got to stop saying these ridiculous things. Having your absurd opinions. So the first story I want to talk about, it's gained a little age on it now, but a bunch of people it's really just 2 guys, are moving from Goldman Walmart. And what's interesting about that is it appears as though the good people at Walmart are attempting to brace or endeavor into the financial technology space, or fintech, as those of us in the industry call it.
Okay, first of all, the whole, fledgling financial technology startup, as they call it. Okay, look, there's nothing technological. Can people stop with these announcements with words? Because if we add technology to it, more people will read it, or more people... No, they want to start up a good old-fashioned bank. That's it. It's that simple. They tried this in one state. I think I read as part of the article. They tried this several years ago and it was shut down. They never got the license from the government to do it because there's always been this separation between normal financial industries and commerce. Now, I say this, you and I can go start a bank. It's relatively easily. It's one of those late night infomercials about starting a bank with your own money and then lending it to yourself. And there's this process. Now, that's a bank. That's a lending firm. However, what they're talking about is becoming an FDIC, federally insured bank branch. There's a difference between starting a bank that can lend money and actually being an FDIC insured bank. Now, Walmart's looking at the latter, which would be more difficult to do. Now, for why they're looking at doing it, I don't blame them. I actually learned something that I didn't know from this article, and obviously I'm an idiot. There's a lot of things I didn't know. But the average person apparently in Walmart goes into their stores, the average customer, 30 times a year, which is more than twice the second largest, which is Target. 30 times a year. So if you have a customer, average
they're going in once a month. No, wait, sorry.
No, that's almost 3 times a month.
Yeah, holy
okay, that's like 2.5 times a month, right?
Right.
So the average customer is coming in 2.5 times a month. Anything else you can stick in there. And look, this is even a new idea for them as far as most of the Walmarts near us have some sort of bank branch in them, but I guarantee you they're not making the money, right?
No.
Like that they would if they had their own money or whatever. And you're talking about the banking industry, which is a racket. It's a good old-fashioned mob's racket in itself, right? You're talking about, according to this same article, some banks made as much as $17 billion in overdraft fees last year.
Right.
Billion with a B.
And so Walmart actually already explored this industry a little bit when they previously had partnered with American Express, and they created a prepaid credit card, which is this kind of weird, I would call it like end run around traditional banking because it's not a bank account, but it literally does everything a checking account does. You can deposit, you can get your direct deposits, you can deposit checks, you can move money. It was called Bluebird by American Express, and it was exclusive to Walmart. You would think, we've talked about American Express. It's this big company who mainly focus on luxury, good and luxury. They focus on high-end consumers.
Right.
But we all understand one thing, and that Walmart excels at, which is speaking to the lower tier customer with less access to financial services. Listen, Walmart, you can wire money at a Walmart. You can cash checks at a Walmart. There's already a handful of services that are not classified as requiring a banking license that you can do inside of a Walmart, and you can do cheaply.
But they've done all that with partnerships. And that's where the next level is. Just like Amazon's looked into this as well, right? These big companies. It's not about, at some level of business, when you get into these large, like Walmart, Amazon, right, Facebook, in these big companies, you move past the partnership phase because it's always about growth, right? You're either growing or you're dying. There's no third direction. And when you look at a company like Walmart, that, okay, it has UPS in its stores, it has a bank in its stores, it has, you can send money, but it's really not them sending money. They're using Western Union or whatever partner they have in the region or whatever it may be. So the only way to continue to grow at some level is to start offering them those services to by yourself, so that you're not giving them a cut. You're not giving Western Union a cut. You're not giving that bank a cut.
Right.
You're keeping all the money in-house. They want to be able, how does any bank make money? It's through fees. If Walmart can keep those fees in-house with a customer that's going to come into their stores 2.5 times a month, and they're there anyway. Look, and guess what? Every lobbyist on the banking side, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, right? They're all lobbying against this. They're all lobbying from this is why Walmart didn't get the license several years ago.
So I wonder, I'm curious to know, and I think this may end up being the route they go, which is they go find a smaller network of banks or a handful of them and just start acquiring them, gobble them up. Because it's just easier to go that route with infrastructure's there and just kill their existing retail business and move all that. And this connects in my head anyway. I'm always like, I'm like Charlie connecting the dots all the time. Everyone knows the meme. But, we recently saw an article. I'll link it in the description, the Dallas Morning News, that Walmart is going to convert one of its existing retail locations in North Dallas to a delivery only or curbside pickup. Yeah, it's a curbside pickup warehouse. They're just going to have pickers on the inside, and you're just going to pull up and they're going to put the stuff in your trunk. That's effectively how I understood it. And so when you see that they're piloting that model, you go, okay. They're wondering, how do we take, like, let's say a store is 50,000 square feet. They're going to convert that a 10,000 square foot of the front end of the store into retail, basically a strip mall within a Walmart, if you will, right?
Right.
Different services, optical, pharmaceutical. They're probably going to have a Minute Clinic style thing in there.
They've definitely tried the medical thing, right? A couple of years back, they tried to do, we're going to put, a clinic inside each one. And
right.
I agree with you, but look, again, they're trying to bring the Walmart model to another industry. And that, again, why would we all live in a world right now? Look, banks, you don't go into your bank anyway. Nobody goes into their banks anymore, right? That kind of thing.
I still do because I try to get all my checks out in cash, but...
But very rarely, when we're talking about statistically, the foot traffic inside your average Bank of America, whatever it is down. So we really live in a technology world. So really, what are they looking at, right? It really doesn't even benefit them to have a bank inside the Walmart. What they want to do is move into the space. They'll have a Walmart banking app where you can access, and they'll try to undercut what everybody else, because again, fees are where banks make their money. When you talk about $17 billion in overdraft fees last year for certain banks, where did that money come from? Was it your average American? Was it your 1%er, your 10%er? No, they're not paying overdraft fees like that. They're paying from the poor, from the lower 20%.
Yeah. Right.
And here's what's crappy about that is when I dug into that $17 billion, and I did a little bit, statistically speaking, most of that $17 billion comes from people that average overdraft fees more than twice a month.
Yeah, and listen, I used to be that person, right? And there came a point where I was just like, I went and turned off overdraft, meaning I was just like, yeah, I'd rather just be like, yeah, my card didn't work. I guess it's broken or the machine's broken. Or I just don't have money right now, and that's fine. Right. Because I've spent, there was one occasion where it was like $400. This is an account that I forgot existed, and I forgot I had something attached to it to auto pay. And I went in, and the guy, fixed everything, and he was super kind. And then I waited a week, pulled all my cash out, which was $14, and closed the account. I was like, I'm just not going to have a bank account. Like, I'm just going to limit myself to one account at one place and hardly use it. And I think that, and listen, there's another company that attracts the lower end of the consumer called Mobile. They also got into the business with a partnership. Because I walked into a T-Mobile to get a new phone. And there was 3 people in line in front of me. I'm like, oh, great. 3 people trying to get phones. 3 people trying to just pay their bill this month. Like, right. What? Like, to me, it was like I didn't even realize people came in and did that. I was just like, what? You just do it online. Who does this in person? Yeah. Because I'm fancy like that.
But that's, I fall on the side sometimes. And again, I know you don't agree with me on this when it comes from companies looking out for consumers or whatever. Danny is a big fan of, you make stupid decisions, you deal with the ramifications of that, and screw you.
But listen, you learn, and I think the concept...
No, you don't learn. That's the problem. When you're talking about this demographic of people, the bottom 20 or 30%, whether it's through ignorance or through necessity, they don't learn. And here's why. Remember Cricket Wireless? And I'm sure it's still around to a certain standpoint.
They're owned by AT&T now. They're called something else.
But Cricket Wireless first came out as you pay your own, you know what I mean? You only pay what you use. You go, yeah. And they preyed on this demographic of people that couldn't go get a cell phone because their credit was bad. And you know what I mean? It was almost a prepay kind of thing back in the day. And there was a while that I worked with a company that part of their job was getting a hold of these kind of people, right? Not debt collection, but getting a hold of these people to try and help them. And you know what the motto was half the time you were calling someone's cell phone number? The Cricket number you have dialed is no longer in service, right? And they prey, and I say pray because it's a business model, right? This falls into the same thing as some of the check cashing places and the payday loan places and this kind of stuff.
Right. And, there was actually a lady who did a study who was a professor, and she's like, why do poor people make such terrible financial decisions? And she actually she went and worked in a handful of payday lending and check cashing places. And she's like, actually, these consumers are very intelligent. They just understand that, for one reason or another. When you said necessity, now that I agree with. One guy's like, hey, listen, I go to the check cashing place because if I don't pay my day laborers every day, they don't come back to work the next day.
Right.
Because they just assume that it's not going to happen because they've been burned enough. So there is I see where you're coming from. And obviously, we have ideological differences because I'm smarter than you are.
Sure.
There's
nobody that watches this show that believes that, by the way. But go ahead.
Well, they're idiots. Our show is literally called Idiots versus Idiots. Our audience is made up of...
We're all idiots, yes. Yeah.
So, nonetheless, what I'm driving at is these consumers are unbanked. That is the term in the industry.
Yes.
And like you said, they're walking to Walmarts with a decent enough frequency that this could push them over into the banking side. And you're right. They probably don't need to have a huge retail operation. They can probably satisfy everything that the majority of the consumers needs by putting up a kiosk.
Oh, absolutely. Well, yeah, exactly. And why even take up some of their space that they could lease out to other people, right? Like the the nail salons and the hair salons and
Right.
the eye doctors and dentists and anybody else, like you said, and then put up a kiosk because 99.9% of their services are going to come from a Walmart banking app, right? But again, how do they get in and make it worth their while is getting all of these people on board in droves. And how do they do that? The same way they've done it to other pharmacies when they move into a small area or whatever. They charge less, they push you out of the market, right? That kind of thing. So I think
generally serving the less financially equipped customer better, with lower fees.
And I look, from that standpoint, I hope you're right. But again, there's no company out there, at least in this size, that is doing much of anything altruistically. They're doing it because they're gonna get these fees. They're gonna make their money, and they want to make their money and add it to their bottom line.
What evil people trying to get into business to make money?
Hey, we're all in it to make money, but how you choose to make it is definitely there is a difference there, Danny. Some of us have what they call ethics and morals, but sure.
I'm unfamiliar with those phrases.
Maybe you are the smarter one,
Right. But hey, we do want to talk about something very serious over here at Idiots versus Idiots. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, audience. But we're death peddlers. That's right. We peddle the death of plastic pollution. Not only does liquid death murder your thirst, 10% of every can sold goes to end plastic pollution. Let me tell you something, friends. It is a superior water delivery system. You can use code IDIOTS10 at liquiddeath.com. You can get two free koozies with your order.
Facebook tried to accuse us of drinking beer. That's what Facebook tried to do. Facebook tried to accuse us of drinking beer.
Yeah, and I also got accused of that by a police officer while I was driving around drinking one.
And it's like, no.
I went to high school with the guy, so it was fine. But this next story is, hey, stop trying to make flying taxis.
You know what? We talked about this several weeks ago.
Yeah, this is a follow-up to our story from several weeks ago.
Well, and like you said, it's a little different in that we talked about how Uber sold its flying car division, which was
Did you even know Uber even had a flying car division?
We didn't at the time. And now here it is several months later, or a couple of months later, and we're talking about it again. And now we've been talking about here a lot here recently about companies going public and SPACs versus an IPO, that kind of stuff. Here's yet another company that is starting, that wants to go public. Joby. Is it Joby? Joby? Joby,
I think it's Joby Aviation. I got a cousin named Joby. So.
There you go. So Joby trying to go through an SPAC with an initial valuation, because Danny makes fun of me when I say evaluation, valuation of $6.6 billion. Again, how are they getting this value? This is not a company that currently does anything. And not even, okay, let's just, for the sake of argument, because this really gets me, this whole SPAC, what they call blank check companies, which, by the way, if you're looking for an investor, they're looking at doing the SPAC with Reinvent Technology Partners. R as in Robert, T as in Tom, P as in Paul is their stock ticker. Currently, as of today, trading at about $10.50 a share. But so if you're interested, say, hey, this is going to be something, there's your stock ticker to buy that will eventually be Joby Aviation, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, my point is, it's driving me nuts. Let's make this simple, right? What is this idea? This idea is we pick you up here and we drop you off there, trying to make it as low cost as driving your car, right? That's their idea. We already have helicopters, right? Helicopter, like LeBron James, right? Right? There are helicopter pads. These rich people have helicopter pads.
Wait, why did you say LeBron James?
LeBron.
You meant Kobe Bryant.
I know. I was trying to go not directly with tears in the eyes, right? Kobe Bryant. Okay. Anyway. But look, basketball players, millionaires, billionaires, right? They all have helicopter pads at their house. The president of the United States has a helicopter pad, right? That takes them to the airport, that takes them to whatever. And it's not cheap, but let's say it already exists. And because it already exists, would the average everyday person use it even if it was lower cost? So if they're not going to use a helicopter, why would they use a you know what
taxi,
I mean? A flying taxi that essentially does the same thing. And there's no mention in this who's going to fly these things.
Yeah, and that is the curiosity for me. But also, listen, this is not some small fly-by-night venture at this point.
No.
Toyota's a partner here, right?
I thought that was really interesting.
And it's being taken public by Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn. It's fascinating. I'm fascinated by the concept that they think this is going to be a thing. Now, I think if it happens, that's the point where I, as someone who's, the youngest guy ever, right? I go, I've seen it all.
You finally get your flying cars that we've all been promised for the last 50 years?
You're taking it too far. Well, you're making my pictures look like they're turning their head and now the cars are flying. No thanks.
Look, I don't know if it will be a thing. They're saying by 2024, right, to open up their first market. There's a lot of things that have to happen. I think, like you, when I read, okay, not only is Toyota in this, Toyota is allowed. The only thing that might make this somewhat of a reality is they're not only in this, they are sharing access to its supplier network. So basically saying, hey, all these contracts we have with these companies to make parts, to make, whatever, we're sharing that with this company, which brings cost of parts and tools and everything else down.
Listen, my only curiosity is, the thing that makes helicopters expensive is the engine and the fuel it takes to run these things. And then obviously is it's loud as the Dickens helicopters. Why everyone wears headsets. Mike, I'm just wondering, what are they thinking? Is my curiosity is this electric? They're going to use some sort of electric propulsion system because those flipping jets on a helicopter. I mean, those are nuts. It's wild.
Well, but again, you're talking about, FAA rules and guidelines. Helicopters, planes, things that fly have to, at least the traditional things that fly, right, have to have checkups every certain thousands of miles, hours, right?
The comedian Bill Burr talks about how he's got his helicopter pilot's license just as a goof. And he's like, yeah, the biggest thing is you have to go through pre-flight every single time.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and that's why I'm curious who's going to drive these things.
Right. And so I'm wondering if there's some combination of the people on the technology side of this saying, hey, listen, we are so close to getting good self-driving cars. And if we take that existing technology and pair it with existing autopilot, there is some synergy here to where we can actually make these things self-flying. And they just land back at their, at a home base location where they're checked out. Somebody is examining them. That person's stationary, right? And that person
you have two spots, right? It goes here, it goes there. Yeah. Well, and again, let's say that's the case. You still have to insure them, right? Who's going to insure these things?
Right.
Rental car companies, you still have to have an insurance, right? I mean,
right.
So who's going to insure these things, especially if they're self-flying? Who's going to and if something bad happens, and look, the helicopter industry has gotten away with this by the people that manufacture helicopters aren't responsible for it. If the helicopter goes down, you're suing the company that bought the helicopter, right? Because they've been able to separate themselves, from the manufacturer, away from it by as soon as I sell it, these people are responsible. So in this case, they're trying to manufacture it. They're trying to be the company that runs it. They're trying to be all of it. I think that's a disaster.
Yeah. But Toyota's $620 million into their investment.
Well, okay, that's a scratch, right? And
but
I think if this happens, and I'm putting a big if, and if I was a betting man, which is I am, I put money on the fact that it's not up and running by 2024 either. But if it does ultimately happen, I think you would only see it in large cities, It would be one of these things like the Elon Musk monorail underneath Las Vegas kind of thing, where
Los Angeles.
No, well, no. It started in
Oh,
Las
no.
Vegas, right? It
Oh,
started
okay.
in Las Vegas. But anyway, the point is, okay, how many of those are you actually going to see? You're going to see one in Vegas. You're going to see one in L.A. Maybe ultimately you see one in, Austin, or how many? If you get these flying taxis, how many places would actually have the workforce, the people with enough, I don't want to say IQ, not IQ, but someone that's willing to try it and willing to use it.
Yeah.
It's not in rural America, which is
No.
98% of the country. It's in New York City. It's in Los Angeles. It's in,
But hey, like this, you're probably right in your estimation that this thing ain't going to happen in the next 3. But you look at the team. That's sometimes who I look at and I go, I am, listen, we're called idiots versus idiots, but everyone knows I'm a genius, right? I am the smartest person probably alive. So when I see these people who are smart, not as smart as me, but they're still smart. When I see them go, it's Reid Hoffman, right? It's Matt Field, the former CFO of Ford North America. It's Toyota. I go, these are collectively, maybe they're getting to where I am intellectually.
Sure.
And that makes me curious to know,
But you never know someone's, and this is when you get into big business. Just because someone attaches their name, this is the business of big business. Toyota can be backing this because, look, there is no downside to them. They've given them $620 million, which is in the grand scheme of things, Toyota is nothing.
And we don't know how that's split up, right? Listen.
Well, and if it fails, they get to write it off as a loss.
Yeah, so here's another thing for all you guys, you cool cats and kittens out there. If you're unaware of like how the release schedule works, sometimes it's a runway. A company might say, hey, we're investing $100 million into your technology. And you go, okay. They didn't just write $100 million check. They didn't just wire $100 million. They said, okay, you're getting $100,000 today. Then if you show progress in a month, we'll give you another $100,000. And if you show progress a month after that, you'll get $250,000. That's how it works. So they said we're investing $620 million. In reality, their investment may never come to fruition at that number. Their investment might get to $50 million, and they go, "We're writing the $50 million off. It's done." And that has happened before. A company called Microsoft wrote off in the entirety of Nokia for $1 bajillion.
Well, look, and there's a billion ways to slice that pie. That's only one way, right? There are some investments where you get X number of dollars up front. There are some investments where and this again comes out to, it gets me just like on the first story when people use words like technology and whatever.
Right.
Investment
They
is
use
this broad,
buzzwords.
yeah, this broad term. It could be $620 million by Toyota. $300 million of that could be a existing pre-order that if they actually get these things made, we're going to buy $300 million worth of taxis from you. But they get to say that up front, that Toyota's giving us $620 million. And they don't have to explain, like you said, how they're getting it, when they're getting it, what the things are to get it.
Listen, this is public relations, right? This is marketing. It's about creating sentiment. So they create a sentiment in the mind of the consumer, the retail investor. Toyota's invested. Reid Hoffman, right? And then you go and buy up their SPAC stock. That's where the real money comes from. That's
and Toyota's could be getting part of that. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Is you never know what the contracts are in the back end. Toyota's not giving them $620 million for free. It's not a tax-free, interest-free loan. There's something they're getting in return, whether it's part of the company, and part of the revenue, part of whatever. They're getting their share. So again, this is the business of big business. There is very little risk, I guarantee you, Toyota putting this $620 million in.
Otherwise, they wouldn't do that.
They're going to get their money back plus something, no matter what, to this company. If it never makes a car, like I said, at the very least, it could be a $300 million write-off.
Is this a car, though? Can we call? I mean, my issue is, and this is, we're gonna close the segment on this argument, and then Big Man's gonna read his ad read. But at this point, is this a flying car, or is this a mini helicopter? Because to me, I don't even like calling electric cars cars. Okay.
Right.
If a car has to go vroom vroom, it has to do that.
Well,
That
you're
is
a
the
car
minimum.
purist, right? You're a car
Yes.
purist.
Yes.
You know, and
I'm
but
a
who's
car
going to regulate it?
enthusiast.
Who's
I'm a
going to
car
regulate this? The aviation
Well,
industry? The car
let me tell you
industry?
something.
Is it
Let me
going
tell
to
you
have
something.
emission standards? Is it
Listen,
going to have...
the government loves regulating. Okay. There's going to be 6 different agencies that are really like, we all get to regulate this at the same time.
I'm just saying, you got something flying through the air. You're even talking about who tracks it. There's going to have to be flight plans to protect planes and short...
Well, because, like, you have to file right now, like, because, like I said, I am, one of the youngest people alive. I'm also a genius, probably the smartest person in the world.
Sure.
But I'm also abundantly wealthy. And what some of you who fly commercial may not know is when, if I dial up my pilot right now, Ralph, and I say, hey, Ralph, I want to be wheels up in 30 minutes. He's like, no, we need time to file a flight plan with the FAA. So it's not like I can just say, I'm going to go for a drive and, we're going to go wheels up and fly up to Oklahoma to go to the WinStar Casino and play some blackjack today, right? Can't do that. Flight plan. We can't get up in the air for like at least a couple hours.
Sure. Now, personal aircraft doesn't fall into that, which he would know, being the smartest person.
No, hold on.
No, personal aircraft, only certain size, like, yes, personal jets.
Yes.
But your independent 1 or 2, 3-person airplanes that fly out from small airports, which we have one in the neighborhood right here, that people take off and land all day long.
Yeah.
As long as they stay under a certain number of feet, they don't have to put any, you know what I mean? And they have to stay away from certain safety air zones.
Yeah, I know.
Could this fall under that same thing? Where they
that's
don't.
very possible.
But if they don't have to, but they're going to have, being but
that's
here's
the
a
thing.
Private versus company, right?
That's
a company's going to have to put a flight plan.
But,
we're going from here to here 15 times a day.
Right, but here's the other thing, though. There's a logic to what you're saying, because now I, of course, am a Cessna. I fly a Cessna. It's a 660 Business X jet, right?
Sure.
So on sometimes a Global Express. But the logic of what you're saying is simple, because how many people are putting a private tiny airplane? You're not getting over a certain feet of it's just fine. It's not that many people, right?
Right.
But when you have flying taxis then it becomes a different story. Now it's a different story, because now we got too many things up in the air. And, if the Wi-Fi goes down, or let's say it's owned by Apple, and Apple says, hey, we're coming out with the iTaxi 12, and you're flying in an iTaxi 11, they're going to be like, well, iTaxi 11 doesn't go fast anymore because iTaxi 12 is out. So now you're just stuck in the middle of the sky,
See, that's the other part of this story that I think doesn't get talked about enough. As we move into the future, we have to build an entire different way of infrastructure, an entire different way of thinking. If we're talking about someday having,
and I think the key phrase and the key mistake in your phrasing is we. There ain't no we here. That's the problem with our society. There ain't no we. It's just me.
No, it's not. He is wrong about that, and
That's
you all
incorrect.
listening know it, okay? That's just the way it is. But there is a we. There is a collective we that if we are going to get driverless cars one day, the collective we have to create an infrastructure that supports that. Right? If we are going to have flying taxis, driverless taxis, that take us from point A to point B and fly us up and down, there's still going to have to be an infrastructure that supports that doesn't, as a helicopter's flying from point A to point B, jacks up everybody's Wi-Fi, jacks up everybody's cell reception, you know what I mean, loses connection to whatever satellite it's linked into, and has a backup satellite that it links to when the first one, you know what I mean, goes down, redundancies and yada, yada, yada. This is a world that we live in. I mean, look, 5G is a collective of, not because the user needed it, but because the cell phone companies needed it to expand bandwidth. It wasn't about you or speed. It was about them building an infrastructure for the future that can handle the bandwidth of everybody watching television shows on their computer. Or, I mean, on their tablet, on their phone. It was more for them than it was for you. So that's what I'm saying, is that you're talking about all these things we keep coming across. It takes a different type of infrastructure that we already have. We're talking about building a new type of infrastructure for the future.
Yeah, and again, me being the resident genius of the program, you keep saying we, I keep throwing up in my mouth.
Well, yeah, because...
Why don't you tell them about big man gear? We can get into the next story.
God, you're an idiot. But anyway.
Well, it goes both ways.
So true. Big Man Gear. Big Man Gear, that's me. Big Man Gear is the big man's idea of a funny merch brand. It's every corny dad joke and Generation X meme, not boomer meme, on t-shirts for sale on Amazon Prime so that it will get to you in your 2 days, that kind of crap. Currently, you can buy the unapproved Idiots vs. Idiots logo tee that Danny absolutely hates at bigmangear.com, because who doesn't need another t-shirt that tells everyone how you feel about your personal news source?
You read the whole thing.
I did read the whole thing, So Danny takes all the time to write these dumb things, so I thought, you know what? Let's give it to him, like he wants it.
This next story I find to be superbly interesting. Redfin is acquiring Rentpath, I believe, out of bankruptcy.
They are attempting. Let's back that up, because Rentpath is in bankruptcy, and so to acquire it, they've already tried to been acquired once, and antitrust laws came in and said no. They tried to merge with a company called CoStar Group, which is the other big rental property apartment finding type of, and antitrust laws came in and said, no, because these are your two biggest players in your apartment finder, your rental finders. These are the two biggest players. Now, again, you're talking about a guy that owns parts of several real estate companies, but I'm in this industry, and this is actually from a federal government, and Danny's not going to like this, from a federal government antitrust aspect. They're really getting concerned about, because when you are looking for a home to rent or to buy, how many sources out there, especially accurate sources, are people finding, are people going to, right? People are going to Zillow. Well, they've had, a dozen different antitrust lawsuits filed against them because of inaccurate information. Does that stop anybody from going? Is there any money being spent out there saying, hey, Zillow's giving you bad information, don't go there?
Right.
No, nobody's spending any money telling you that, right?
Of course,
So in this case, you have a company that was already tried to merge because they are in... Because you're talking about a company that has $688 million in long-term debt that last year only made $194.
Right. And you're talking about Rentpath.
Right. I'm talking about Rentpath. But then you're talking about Redfin trying to acquire it. The same thought process comes in, right? Redfin is a big company.
The reason I personally, of course, again, don't see a major conflict is because Redfin is traditionally viewed as a means of purchasing.
Correct.
The vast majority, I would have to guess, 90+% of people hopping on Redfin or using a Redfin agent are buying a home. They're not renting. Mm-hmm. So Rentpath gives them, it's an entirely different market, whereas CoStar is the data provider for a bunch of different, like apartments.com and all these other places.
A bunch of your big names.
So I can understand the, overstep of the federal government, which shouldn't even exist, but they, of getting into the craw of CoStar and saying you can't do this, as compared to Redfin being perhaps a better partner. And I'm looking at a couple other places. You're right. It's still a pending deal, but it doesn't look like there's any news about it being,
Well, these things take time. I don't know what Redfin look, I was about to say I don't know what Redfin really gets out of this, but what they get out of this, look, you can go to Redfin and you can look for apartments and you can look for rentals. You can already do that through their website. You can do it through mine. You can do it through anybody's. What are they actually buying here? And we've talked about this a billion times. They're buying an audience. They're buying a database from the largest database collector of people that want to rent apartments, homes, whatever, right? Redfin being a discount brokerage, right? That, on the sales side of real estate, being a discount brokerage, they want that data. They want to turn around and market to all these people, not only about to buy a house, but all these renters that have been renting to buy a house, right? And they want to increase their database, and I'm sure it's probably by like 10 or 15 fold if they are able to acquire. They have no desire. Now, they'll have to take on some of this debt, but if they're in Chapter 11, they'll probably be able to restructure some of it, right? And then only take on probably half of it, which they would be glad to do for the database itself.
Right. So this is a curiosity of mine. So due to the events of 2020 and Dos Equis, the government put a halt on foreclosures, and they put a halt until the summer of this year on evictions.
Yes.
So depending on what happens, and that's not, we can only speculate. There's no concept of knowing what will happen. But my guess is going to be, if you don't have $1,200 in May of last year to pay your rent, you're not going to have the $13,000 in back rent you've accrued in the last year.
We've already, as of, I think it was December 2020, we have surpassed the number, now I'm going to be careful about this, the number of people that are behind on their mortgage, right? We have already passed the percentage of people that are at least 1 month behind on their mortgage that caused the 2008 housing crisis. We've already surpassed that. Now, the question becomes, and I say I'm going to be careful about that, is because they're more than a month behind with the current moratoriums, right, and stuff like that, it doesn't necessarily mean that someone doesn't figure out how to fix it between now and the time that ends. Whether it's through mortgage modifications, whether it's through forgiveness, whether it's through whatever that may come up, whether government or lending between now and then. But that number scares people when you go, there are one in almost every 4 people in America are at least a month behind on their mortgage. So, that's a lot.
So, and I wonder if a lot of those corporations, a lot of these big companies that own apartment complexes, given the leeway from the government, because rental, the other thing, I don't think a lot of people outside of the real estate industry understand is rent, even if you live in most of the cities in the United States are non-rent control, there's still a cavalcade, a mass of regulations that got the guidelines that determine how you rent apartments and homes.
100%.
And a lot of times it's like they legally cannot give you a break, right? If you're unless it's like you have a informal agreement, handshake deal with your buddy who's like, yeah, you can just rent my house while I'm whatever, which I've done that before. Mm-hmm. But if you have a formal lease agreement, they can't cut you a break. There are legal prevention, the things that legally prevent them from cutting you a break. Sometimes they are legally required to take you to court.
Right.
Because they don't want it to appear as though, a landlord is showing preferential treatment to one kind of person, saying, okay, I know you're behind, but then evicting someone else. So what I'm interested to know is Redfin going, hey, a bajillion people are going to foreclose. If we end up owning Rentpath, people are going to need to rent apartments and homes. But I also think mortgage lenders, landlords are going to go, listen, we don't figure out some sort of agreement with these people. The other side of it is we have vacancy. Yeah. And that vacancy is just going to be harder and harder to fill because people are not going to meet the credit requirement.
It becomes, look, this is the question. Here's what several, and it's not just Redfin, what you said is very astute. There are several people in the real estate.
Because I'm a genius.
I won't go that far. There's several people in the real estate industries and the supporting industries that are banking on what you just said, that there will be a lot of people that do get foreclosed on for whatever reason that they may or may not offer. It's not going to cover 100% of everybody, but they're banking on the fact that there will be a lot more renters coming out of this. Right? And not only that, but the opposite is true as well. There are people, conversation I had earlier today, that are banking on the short-term rental market going up so much that they're buying up homes in certain places like Orlando, Florida, where Disneyland, you know what I mean, or whatever. So it seems to be opposite sides of the spectrum are counting on it to get a lot worse for this side and a lot better for this side. Does that make sense?
BlackRock just acquired a company that will buy your house from you and let you rent it, and they'll rent it back to you because they are
That's been around for a while.
I know, but here's the thing: it's been around for a while, sure. The fact that BlackRock, one of the world's largest hedge funds, bought into the industry shows me that they're at least betting on a thesis that it was there was some positives to the crash of 2008 and 2009, there wasn't enough alternatives to the people who are like, hey, I'm going to get back on my feet or what have you.
Sure, but it's short term for them. I'll tell you, anybody in Central Texas right now that's willing to sign their house over to me and let me rent it back for them for what they're paying, I'd do it all day, every day, because here's why. Look, any big company, what they're betting is long term. That's the difference between the average person and big companies. Is I can afford to lose money for the next 2 years, knowing that I'm going to multiply it by 10 the next 5 after that, right? 2008, 2009 crash, the people that were able to hold on to their homes for the next 7 years until 2014, 2015, made their money back in droves, just cashola. It's the people that had to sell during the down market or had to do something that lost their job during the housing crunch or whatever. Those are the people that suffered, right? It wasn't the other way around. So like BlackRock, they're just seeing it as an opportunity. They can tie their money up for the next 2 years and take equity away from people that they know 3 or 4 or 5 years from now, they're going to double it. You know what I mean? They'll all get all their money back plus more than if they would have stuck their money in a bank, right? So it's opportunistic. And again, I'm not saying they shouldn't do it. I'm just saying people have to go into situations with their eyes wide open.
So I'm looking at it like this. Are they taking away people's equity? If you're going to foreclose on your house, right? Because that's what you said was like they're taking away people's equity. But listen, you're on the brink of foreclosing on your home because you can't make the payments. It is way smarter for you to find a company that's going to prevent that event from happening where you don't have to move.
Correct.
And it's always a bummer to move when you don't want to. You know? You're moving.
Nobody ever wants to move.
Yeah, I mean, but it's one thing if you're like moving into my dream home, moving to a new city where I got a new opportunity, whatever. It's different when I'm leaving because I can't afford to be in the place that I love to live. So I think that I do think that it's interesting, and I like that conversation about the future real estate market in the context of the events of 2020. I think is really interesting, and it's even more fascinating to know that people are betting on both sides of it, like both sides of the concept. Like they both either thing might happen.
And when I say both, I'm playing both sides myself. Again, being in the industry, I'm playing both sides myself. Look, it's a good bet. It's a bet, but it's a good bet. Even if and I think again the government federally backed lending, right? Yeah. People that have FHA loans and whatever, federally backed lending, they're going to come out with some plan that accommodates a large amount of people, but it's not going to be everybody. It's just not.
So here's what I do know. I do know some people who have been behind on their mortgage, aside from post-2008 and aside from Dos Equis. And I know that the bank bent over backwards in a way they would not have done 10 years ago.
Absolutely.
To accommodate them and say, can we just figure... Because they know the cost of picking them out, and then you don't know what somebody's going to do when they're getting kicked out of their house. You don't know if they're going to leave all the water on. You don't know if they're going to take the copper out of the walls, out of the copper piping out of the walls. You don't know what kind of nonsense people are going to get up to closing, and they're angry.
Mm-hmm.
they know that it's just cheaper, quicker, easier to say. And, we exist in a time where there is volumes of liquidity coming from the Federal Reserve to continue to backstop these, what I would call bad mortgages. But
yeah,
that's just my assessment as a genius. But,
it will come out the other side with more renters, at least in the short term. And people with money, as always, opportunistic, people with money are going to make more money. Like, we've talked about it on this show. There will be opportunities in multiple ways coming out the other end of this to make a lot of money. Probably more so than in any other time in my life. And I lived through, 3 depressions now?
Yeah.
A gas
economic
crisis.
Downturns.
Right, and stuff like that. So,
Right.
but this will probably be the last one in my lifetime. The opportunity that is there currently, not just in real estate, but in multiple different facets. And we'll continue to talk about those here on the show.
Yeah, and let me just say this much as my kind of parting thesis here. I love the real estate industry. I'm actually working on getting a license at the moment. And none of the events have deterred me from doing that, because a lot of people might have been like, yeah, it's all coming down. But my view is that there are a lot of people who own homes that are burdened by them and not blessed by them.
Correct.
And I think those people, if those people are the people who don't keep their homes, or they end up becoming renters, their attitude is, if they have an optimistic attitude about it, I think they're going to come out on the other side of it so much better off, because they didn't understand how their home was weighing them down for a lot of different reasons, which is you want to move to a different state for a better opportunity. You want to go somewhere where it's warm. Listen, I think these people are nuts. But I'm working in that industry. People who want to go live in a van. Okay.
Right.
I think you're nuts. I ain't living in a van. Okay.
No.
My grandfather left a third world country so I could live in a lap of luxury. All right.
Yeah. No. These tiny houses and these buying a bus and living in a bus or living in a van, or
you're an
like,
insane
you're
person.
crazy. You're crazy.
Yeah.
And again, if it's you, do you.
God bless. I'm saying
Absolutely.
God bless. Go with God. I don't think you're a bad person. I just think you're whacked. There's something wrong with your brain.
Agreed.
But there are so many people engaging in #van life that there is an entire cottage industry to build those vans now. So, and we may or may not have something coming that is adjacent to that industry. But nonetheless, what I'm trying to drive at here is, it's going to free you. Like this house, because the mentality that your home is an asset, that's a lie. Not saying you shouldn't buy it, right? But when people say, I invested this much money to buy a car, I'm like, you're a moron. You didn't invest money to buy a car. You threw the money away. That's the point of money. Sometimes you just throw some of it away because you enjoy what you bought with it. And I know people, my dad's one of these guys, like, his house probably hasn't been the greatest investment for him. He could have probably put his money in other places and rented and got a better return. But he enjoyed the crap out of his house. He enjoyed living in it, and he enjoyed it. So he got the return in a different way. Well, for a lot of people, that house, because they bought into go to college, get a degree, get a job, buy a house, and they didn't realize that it was holding them back from more happiness, because they never bothered to ask themselves, what makes me happy? And sometimes you have to find the bottom of your barrel, before you go, what do I actually freaking care about? Right? And I've been blessed enough to have 1,000 of those opportunities in my life where it helps me adjust. And I go, listen, I enjoy buying watches that I probably shouldn't own, but I enjoy them. So I'm going to buy them. Right? But it's because, and I go, listen, I don't care that much about buying sneakers or jeans or fancy clothes. So I'm buying black T-shirts because that's what I like wearing, and cowboy boots. And that's just what I wear all the time now, instead of suits. And dude, trying to buy a suit for a guy my size is
no. It's called custom made, brother. It's called
that's
custom
what I'm
made.
saying.
That's how you make them. But
and
look,
everything
you said is like very Danny-esque in his quote unquote intelligent genius way. Is partially true. And what I mean partially true is partially true for a minority. You're talking about a very small percentage of how it works. The fact is, yes, a home, I could argue, easily is not an asset, but it is an investment. And if it's done intelligently from start to bottom, and people take the investment part of it as part of the equation when they're purchasing, what I see more often than not in the people that you're describing, that minority that you're describing, is they make bad decisions from the get-go. They bought the wrong house in the wrong neighborhood in the wrong place,
the wrong time,
in the wrong
for the
time,
wrong amount
in
of
the wrong,
money,
and they didn't seek out professional advice, or if they did, they got attached to the wrong people that helped them in those decisions, which we can all listen to bad advice from time to time, right, and whatever, but a lot of us get into those situations because they don't seek out professional advice. They don't seek out people that tell them you're doing a bad thing at a bad time, right? Or whatever. So the majority of people, when they invest properly in homes, it is a great investment. And they do see that return on investment over the years and that kind of stuff. And again, a home is not an asset. Right. Okay, it's just not. It doesn't fit the definition of an asset, but it is an investment, and if done properly, it is still the number one way to get wealthy in America. By statistic probability, it is still the number one way. Most millionaires, statistically, have gained their wealth through real estate more than any other industry. Okay, now, that being said, there's a difference between buying a house and investing in real estate. There is a difference, right? But anyway, look, again, I'm going to go back to this Redfin, and the whole point of Redfin and Rentpath is Redfin is trying to buy a database from a company that's going through foreclosure. They want that database, as you said, to leverage it coming out the other side of Dos Equis and trying to get on board with it, right, so that they can then market to that database and pick up on that trend. They're just trying to buy up market share. Whether it gets through antitrust, I do agree that it's not the same as when they were trying to merge with CoStar Group, but it is still similar.
Right.
So I'd be interested to see.
It's pronounced similar. I'm kidding.
Similar.
Right. So we're going to jump into this next story, but it's sponsored by Rise Relentless. Now, Rise Relentless is my company. That's right. Big Man has a custom mug. We only sell 15-ounce mugs, but it's awesome. We sell fun and customized mugs for entrepreneurs, side hustlers, and everyone that dares to dream. I started this company, and shortly after starting the business, I started it exclusively for the purpose of talking about it on this channel. Shortly after, I saw a link. I got an ad on Instagram for a Robert Kiyosaki course. Now, I don't have any beef with Robert Kiyosaki, but he does this thing where he puts his name on a course. Or it's not really Robert Kiyosaki. It's some guy that, is using Robert Kiyosaki's name.
Yep.
About how to make money selling mugs on the internet. I was like, hey, I do that.
Yes.
So then it's RISELENTLESS, riselentless.com.
So you felt like you were smart, is what you're saying?
I didn't feel like I was smart. I felt like I proved the market of what I was doing.
We are going to actually start doing some small clips, short clips on shows that we've done previously where we've been proven very right.
Yes.
Very correct in some of our premonitions, and we're going to start releasing some of those and recording some of those soon.
Premonitions?
So,
what is this? WB's Charmed?
Hey.
Premonitions.
I watched that TV show, so get out of here.
Of course you did.
The point is, we're going to start doing some of those. So keep an eye open for those kind of things, because there's nothing Danny enjoys more than saying that he's right, obviously.
Yeah, the urban youths call that dunking. I dunked on him, coming out of the last political cycle, all I did was to people who bet me money and then didn't pay, Jimbo, a couple other people didn't pay, because you welched on their bets like scum.
You just calling out these people, huh?
Yep. I just sent them gifts of various NBA players dunking on other people. Like, it just came. This next story doesn't involve dunking, but it does involve footballs. And Big Man is a fan of footballs, and he coaches his son's footballs teams. And I know nothing about footballs, but I do know a lot about business. I'm a genius when it comes to business. And this is such a fascinating concept I wanted to talk about.
when you say fascinating, here, this is only loosely based on football. So much so that literally the quote from one of these is, I'm not going to even compare it to what I watch on Sundays because it's a whole new sport. Yes, they are using a football, and just look, to clarify for everybody out there that's listening to this, we're talking about the new fan-controlled football league.
Which, by the way, can I just say this much? Dwayne Johnson purchased XFL out of bankruptcy for some fraction of money. It was like,
of course,
and it was obviously one of those schemes where the guy who owns XFL was just like, "Hey, man, pay $8 million and I'll shed all my debt."
Well, it was the wrestling guy. It was Vince
McMahon. Vince McMahon.
Vince McMahon sold it to The Rock. Right.
Yeah, well, he went bankrupt because he started it in 2020, and that's a sucky year to start a sports.
Bad timing there. Bad timing.
Well, that's just no one could have predicted that. And he went back completely bankrupt. But if this had been the approach of XFL in its rebirth, right, where it's going to be, because give credit to Vince McMahon. I don't care about WWE to say I don't care at all. Not interested. Right. But that guy has an audience that he figured out how to monetize, not just merchandising through his app where you get all of the different events or whatever.
100%.
So, yeah, and I think that he made a mistake. And not a mistake, but I think that this is the innovation that he could have brought to XFL, right? And maybe what they do is they just rip this off and they say, hey, we're just going to be one, and maybe they merge or something. But,
well, maybe he didn't have the time to do it either. Because like you said, it was, all right, we're going to have an XFL, which is spring football, right? We're not going to compete directly with the NFL. And look, they've tried this over and over again for the last 20-something years about, okay, the NFL only takes up, right, from August to January, February. What do we do about these football lovers? And guess what? Football lovers, they consume this sports talk radio. NFL sports talk radio is year-long. It doesn't matter that it's not going on. There are people talking about it and changes and drafts and everything else. So, they've tried over and over. Several different leagues have tried. I think when
2019 was the Alliance. There's Arena Football.
Right. Arena football was around for several. Canadian football is regular football. I mean, that's the Canadian Football League.
I know, but I'm saying there's what's the other one? I think there's Arena Football, and then there's the Alliance of Football.
Yeah,
the American Alliance of Football that went out of business after a year.
Yeah, and look, they keep trying to restart these because you would think that NFL fans would pay to continue watch football. The problem that I've had, and Austin, years ago, a decade ago, had, they called them themselves the Austin Desperados, played at the Frank Irwin Center, lasted a couple of seasons at that, and it was just... When I went and saw it several times, it was too much of a show for me. It wasn't football. They try to make it very fast-paced. Now, what is fan-controlled football trying to do different? What's their current spin on it that they think that is going to succeed? Fan-controlled football is not just a name, folks. It is fan-controlled. You get to pick the teams. You get to pick the players. You get to pick the plays that they play. Right. This is all going to be done through an app. Through Twitch is where you're going to be able to watch these on TV. Every week there's going to be 2 core players that every team has, probably a quarterback or you know what I mean, another. Right. They're going to have a third protected player, and if you play fantasy football and you have protected player leagues, you know what this is. So they're going to have 3 players that are the same on each given team, but every other aspect of the team is going to be drafted weekly. Now, they're going to do it in chunks. That you can't draft individual. This is going to actually, they drew all this from fantasy football, right? Right. Is what they did. That's
what I'm saying is genius about this. And again, I'm a marketing business genius, and that's, a big brain.
Big fantasy football fans are going to understand what this is like a lot. They're going to know. So when I say they're going to draft every week, every team each week is going to draft an entire offensive line together, right? They're going to draft an entire defense line together. There's these bulk players that are not going to do individual names each week. They're going to do bulk players where the teams can be drastically different from week to week other than those 3 core players, right? And that is controlled by the fans. The fans are going to vote and draft and that kind of stuff. Even down now, and again, I don't know how this is going to work in real time. I really don't. They kind of go into some of the explanation because when I saw in here, okay, wait a minute. Fans are going to choose the plays? You're talking real time. How long are you going to have in between plays that you're going to let people, you know what I mean, decide on plays, and how you're going to accumulate that? It's 7-on-7 football versus 11-on-11.
Right.
50-yard field, so half the size.
Yeah, I knew all of that information.
You know what I mean? Well, but not everybody may. You know,
I'm kidding. I have no idea what you're talking about.
But and here's one that I thought was crazy, and I've never heard of this even mentioned. A lot of these rules people have talked about before, right? But this one I never. There's no extra point. There's no kicking. There's no goal posts on this football field. Okay, no kicking. There's no field goals. There's no kicking an extra point after. What they're doing after a touchdown is they're going to do one-on-one wide receiver against a D-back. Quarterback has 3 seconds to throw the ball.
So they're being really creative. They're crafting a unique experience that, like you said, Desperados and other people have tried, but what they didn't do was engage their audience. We talk so much on the show ad nauseum. Point I want to puke. Oh, this is the audience. And I think that is so key here.
Can you not say audience that way when we're trying to build an audience? Can you seriously not do that? But go ahead.
You don't want me to do my Robert De Niro face?
Yeah, you're an idiot. Go ahead.
Okay, I know, but I'm just saying that FCF has done something here that, and I say this often, is that the first mover advantage is not always the advantage.
Correct.
Because these guys might not be capitalized well. Their idea might not fail because it's a bad idea. It might fail because of the lack of the capacity to execute it well. But a guy like Vince McMahon or now Dwayne Johnson or what have you, or larger interests could go, hey, you ding-dongs are onto something. Because guess what? Have you guys ever heard of Magic Taxi? Big man, you ever heard of Magic Taxi?
What is
interesting?
Magic Taxi?
Uber before it was Uber. Like Uber,
okay.
There's a company called Magic Taxi that does what Uber did. Just sucked. Sidecar also sucked. You've never used these apps.
Right. Well, and look, they are really trying, because here's 2 things that they are attempting in today's world, and this wouldn't be available 10 years ago. The technology wouldn't have been behind it. So they're embracing the fan, right, by giving them a say in how this works. But the second thing they're doing is bringing out why is fantasy football so popular? It's the competitive aspect of it, and they're bringing that in here. You're going to literally they're developing an app to go along with this, where it's not Twitch. Twitch is where you're going to see it, right? But how you have a say in your team, how you have a say in the plays, is going to be through what they're calling their Fan IQ app, which you're going to get a Fan IQ score, meaning that if you select plays, they run those plays, and those plays do well, your Fan IQ score goes up. And you think there's not going to be prizes and everything else handed out on a weekly basis?
They are in the app industry what we would call gamifying. They are gamifying
100%.
the experience of being a football fan. And I think this is groundbreaking because you all know NFL 2020 notwithstanding, it's having a rough go of it simply because some people felt as political stuff. I'll just leave it at that because I don't really and they were seeing viewership in the toilet, not in the toilet, but in the toilet for the NFL.
Right.
And I think that the younger fan is going to go, hey, why would I watch? Like, this is, who cares? Like, I'm going to watch some dumb old football team when I can watch fan control. But I do think fan controlled football, it's good branding, it's good marketing because it tells you exactly how it's different. But I think it's short term. But
Well, look, NFL is king, right? In the
yeah,
United States of America, NFL is king, which is why they would never dream of trying to start one of these during football season. You can't go head to head with the king. You just can't, right? So that being the case, they're always going to do this in the offseason. I think there's a lot of questions on this. I mean, they're going to be playing games on Saturdays for 6 weeks. So it's a 6 week trial, right?
much shorter season, right? How long is
Well,
NFL?
Well, they're about to
13,
start
right?
17 weeks, 17 games instead of 16. They're going to add a 17th game next year.
Yeah,
So
because they're running out of they're trying to juice this thing for all it's
yeah, it
worth.
just adds another game. They just signed a new network deal, right? Another network deal just signed for something like trillions of dollars. I mean, it's insane, right? It's insane. Amazon is going to carry Thursday Night Football, right? But anyway, look, so this kind of league obviously doesn't have access to that kind of money,
No.
right? Obviously. So 6 week season, probably this is its first season, so they're going to try this. I would be I'm going to watch this from a standpoint of business, not really football, because it's not going to compare to football. It's going to be a cluster, you know what, in the beginning.
Right.
I think this is a great idea, and I'm going to see how this actually works out with this fan-controlled aspect. Logistically, this could be a nightmare, right, with how it's going to go. They're going to try to keep these games under an hour, 2 20-minute halves, and with a rolling clock, meaning they only stop the clock if there's a touchdown, something like. So they're going to keep that clock going, right? People complain about the NFL, it stops too much, right? Which is why really a 60-minute clock game lasts for 3.5 hours in NFL because of how often it stops. They're trying to keep these games under an hour with 2 20-minute halves, so 40 minutes of play, get it in under an hour because we're not going to stop the clock very often. I doubt there's going to be anything like replay or whatever. It's going to be whatever the ref calls at the time. That's going to be it. Probably not a lot of rules like the NFL is a bunch of rules. They're probably not going to have a lot of rules. Right. And they're just going to keep at it. But I think from a trying to get people to interact, choose plays, all this kind of stuff in real time, is that first game is going to be interesting. Right.
And I let me just relate it to something I understand better. The NFL, the way you describe it, sounds like going to buy a car in the 90s. The value proposition they felt was longer we keep you here, the more invested you are. Right?
Sure.
Whereas the modern thesis is the quicker we get you out the door, rage quit. In gaming, it's called rage quit, where you're like, this is too hard, I'm quitting. And I think maybe the thesis they're working under is that, hey, listen, people are they're disenfranchised from the NFL for a handful of different reasons. These are football fans. We can capture their interest. If we don't make it such a large investment of their life, right?
Yeah.
We can still monetize their interest in sport.
Well, and I think they definitely have some new ideas in it. They're only starting off with 4 teams, where traditionally, like the XFL was going to have, I think, 8 or 10 or something like that.
Yeah.
Like the whole was to broaden, trying to get buy-in from a bunch of different places. This, in the unique way that they're doing this, having the fans involved, I think they're doing the smart thing. We're going to have 4 teams.
Yep.
They're not going to be specifically tied to cities. They're just going to be these 4 different team names, which are, by the way, the Glacier Boys, the Zappers, the Beasts, and the Wild Aces. It may be the 4 worst named teams I've ever heard in my entire life.
The Wild Aces are fun. That's fun.
The Wild Aces are okay, but Beasts and Zappers and the Glacier Boys? What is this?
Yeah.
A 1980s, motorcycle street game?
No, the Glacier Boys sound like a like one of those, like in the 90s, how they made all the gangs on TV multiracial, even though that's not how gangs work. And it's always like someone swinging a chain coming in like, the Glacier Boys are coming out to play.
It's awful. The only really big names you would see in football are on the ownership side. Marshawn Lynch is part. You know what I mean?
You
Beast
see, I thought
mode.
they were trying to talk him into it, and he didn't want to do
Yeah,
it.
he's one of the owners of one of the teams. That kind of. So the big names that you would notice from football are on the ownership side. They're not on the playing side. The only name that anybody would really recognize on the playing side is Johnny Manziel. Is one of the quarterbacks for one of the teams.
Johnny Football.
Johnny Football, right? And making his big football comeback in the fan-controlled football league. So
Wasn't he in the? He was also in the AAL or whatever that was called, the American whatever league.
yeah, he was supposed to be, right? But
Oh, he didn't. He didn't play.
no. So this is his first. So this is the whole point. He's the only guy you would recognize. They're not paying these guys a lot of money. I mean, they're purportedly paying these people $350, $400 a game. You know what I mean? So it's.
I'm not getting bopped in the head for $400, dude.
Well, you have what are people doing this? These are people that either A, can't play in the NFL, you know, or maybe they played in college, right? This is not the there's a lot of small leagues around the country. There's one here in Leander. They're called the Leander Lions, which are they call themselves a professional football team. And what are they? They guys that some of them used to play in the NFL, some of them are previous college players or whatever, and they play a bunch of other Texas football teams. They play at the high school here in one of the high schools here in Leander. They have a small fan base that comes out and watch them bash each other's heads in for basically free. It's kind of like softball, right? These guys that play softball into the 30s and 40s, right? Sometimes people just want to do stuff, and hey, let them,
fine.
you know. But and they play traditional 15-minute, hour-long football. So I mean, it's a cool thing to take the kids and let them watch, grown men bash each other's heads in. So these guys aren't getting paid a lot of money to do this. So I don't know what kind of product we're gonna get, but like I said, it should be at the very least there. It's a new way. So I, like you, always appreciate a good marketing stunt.
Right.
A good marketing idea. And look, if this works, guess what? You're going to see a whole bunch of people out there copycat it.
Of course, yeah. And my curiosity is, do they introduce the concept? Do they get it to a point where it's accepted by the audience, where the NFL goes, we're going to adopt some of that?
Oh, the NFL will never be fan controlled.
Oh, no,
but
of
if they
not.
can figure out a way to copy an app that allows you to have real-time interaction with, let's say, coaches, or assistant coaches, or some kind of way to interact with the NFL in some way,
right?
They would do it 100%. Especially if they could charge you $10 a pop to do it.
Yeah, of course.
Right? So I think it's going to be interesting to see what comes out the other side, because even if this fails, if they can prove concept in some sort, like you just said, we talk about stories all on here all the time where these people are paying crazy amounts of money for unproven ideas.
Yes.
Right? And if the fan-controlled football league comes out the other side of this 3 months from now, 6 months from now,
and they
with
just
an unproven idea, and then they just go, hey, NFL, you want this app because it can do A, B, and C for you, they'll make billions of dollars, right?
Yeah, totally.
And that kind of thing. So I applaud them for the innovation. Yeah. I'm curious to see how it's going to work out.
Same.
Don't agree with me, Danny. It makes me nervous.
Well, no, I'm just saying that I think that it's like, the effort is, even if, like I said, even if they don't execute it to where, the fan controlled league is successful, they're on to something, and that's what's important. And in closing, I just want to say this much. The next revolution that we're going to have in the economy is the crypto and blockchain revolution.
No, it's not, but go ahead.
And I lament it, because all I've ever wanted to do in my life was do a business deal where I carry around a briefcase full of cash. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to do that. This is Idiots versus Idiots. Thank you very much, and we'll see you on the next one, folks.
As usual, Danny's wrong. He's an idiot. We'll see you next time, folks.